if this bill were to be pushed through, even with or without the aid of military force against the American people by American troops, which are now being stationed for this kind of operation, the United States would disappear in very short order, and civilization would crash globally. The world would go into a dark age like that of a similar situation in Europe's 14th century, during which, within a period of a generation, the number of parishes in Europe collapsed by 1/2. The level of population of all Europe collapsed by 1/3. And mass insanity dominated the population of Europe at that time. That was the end of the authority of the feudal imperial system which had ruled Europe from about 1000 AD up until that point. We are on the verge of a situation in which, if the bill is pushed through, the chain reaction effects of the bill will ensure that the population of this planet drops from about 6.5 billion people to less than 2. And that in a fairly short period of time. Entire languages will disappear, entire countries will disappear as entities, and we will go through a dark age worse than Europe experienced in the 14th century. Now, there's some people in the Congress and elsewhere saying, "Oh, we're frightened, you can't do this, don't you know what you're doing, you can't do this, we can't vote against this bill." Why, they'll kill us. If American troops, ordered by the President, turn on the American people to suppress this opposition to this bill, the United States will cease to exist. This is worse than treason. Any such action from any part of government is worse than treason. And anyone who accepts such an order is a traitor to the United States. So that's the situation we face. Now, what are the remedies? What are the alternatives? There are some excellent alternatives, but there are no alternatives for Wall Street. Wall Street has earned its death. It is a dead, stinking fish lying in the streets of Lower Manhattan. The investment banking system is dead, and it should have been killed before it rotted into death. So this is our particular problem. Now, if we want to save the country and save civilization and avoid a dark age, there are some very elementary remedies, some of which I've already stated earlier, a year ago. One is, as I said, we must keep the homeowners in their houses. No evictions. We can make other arrangements to manage the downsizing of the debt, because most of the mortgage debt is fraudulent. That is, the agencies which generated this level of indebtedness, this level of housing prices, committed by fraud against the nation. Therefore, they are not entitled to the full price of the mortgage in any case. But what the full price should be, we don't know. But we'll find out. We will put this housing situation under bankruptcy protection by the federal government with cooperation of state government and local government. People will stay in their homes if they wish to, if they are actually the mortgage holder. Because we must also keep the banks in functioning. Now, we have a problem here. In 1999, when Clinton was in deep trouble because of the frame-up against him by Republicans and others who were trying to stop his attempt to make a change in the financial structure. Remember, at the time, back in 1998, there was a great collapse of a speculative bubble which was created about the Yeltsin candidacy for re-election in Russia, the GKO cases. So at that point, the system was collapsing. I warned the government at that time that the collapse was on. It was inevitable. And the president at that time, this is in August, agreed with me that this was the problem. he moved with the Secretary of Treasury at that time to initiate what became the intent to launch a change in the architecture of our financial monetary system, to eliminate this factor of corruption and to create remedies for it. However, at that time, there was a frame-up organized by forces which were opposed to this reform, which moved toward the impeachment of President Clinton. So President Clinton, during the following year, was living most of his time under the dictatorship of Al Gore, who was acting as the man in occupation of the White House. And the ability of the President, Clinton, to deal with these kinds of problems, which were building up in the year 1999, was limited. Under these conditions and a confused and corrupted Congress, and it was confused and corrupted, the repeal of Glass-Steagall occurred. If Glass-Steagall had not been repealed, we would not be in the kind of crisis we're in today. We should restore Glass-Steagall immediately. That's one of the things the Congress should do. But that's not enough. There are new problems in addition to those addressed by Glass-Steagall, which have been created by this process. So therefore we have to have a larger piece of legislation, and I'll get to that. I also proposed a protection for our banking system in terms of currency. I propose that we have a basic minimal 4% interest rate as the lending rate for our banking system, except in cases of government projects which are in the national interest, government projects certified by the Congress, which would have a lower rate of borrowing. That would have protected us against some of the worst things that went on in this period. Now, the third thing, which is the big one, which is of crucial importance right now, is I propose that the United States approach Russia, China, and India as the big four power of this planet, not to establish a dictatorship by these four powers, but to take a group of four nations which aggregately are so powerful the world has to listen to them and obey some of the suggestions they make. They would immediately be supported in these kinds of measures by Japan, by Korea, and by some nations in Europe, some forces in Italy, some forces in France, like President Sarkozy of France right now. The thing there. There's a movement in Italy, also organized by the finance minister of Italy, which is moving in the same direction. The Italian motion is directly done in my name. That is the idea of a new Bretton Woods, as my policy is specified by a motion, a bill, presented in the Italian Senate now for a new Bretton Woods system. Now, that is the solution, the key to the solution to this situation internationally. We have a world system. The entire system is bankrupt. The entire world monetary financial system is already in a Weimar-style hyperinflationary takeoff. We are weeks or so away from a crisis beyond belief. And all the troops that Bush might wish to deploy to the streets to try to get that bill through will not save the United States from destruction by the effects of his doing that. Therefore, we need the cooperation of Russia, China, and India as a big four around which other nations can gather and simply get rid of the opposition to doing this. It's in the interest of the people of the world, so why not mobilize the major part of the world's population in these and other nations combined, and let's say the people of the world, through their respective national governments, agree this is going to be stopped. What would we do? We would take a leaf out of the book of President Franklin Roosevelt, who's much smarter than these jerks that we now have in government today, and has some better supporters then, too. We would then say we're going to set up, as what the language is, in Russia, in Italy, and from the President of France, and from others, a new Bretton Woods system. And they mean a new Franklin Roosevelt Bretton Woods system.